This is the Balcony Brew Review. I am Larry Hawley, joined by my partner in crime, my good friend, Paul M. Banks. Paul, say hi.
Hello, how's it going?
It is going as well as it can be, which is not great, but we're both inside. We're social distancing. We're staying more than 6 feet away from each other. I'd say probably more like about 2 miles away from each other. But we're going on. We're gonna get this podcast going. Um, and we're going to have a little bit of chance to chat because I think everybody needs a chance to chat right now. So, Paul, right now we're both drinking the same beer, even though we're not in the same area. Again, social distancing. This is 2019 Bourbon County by Goose Island Cafe de Olla. Paul and I, for those of you who might follow the Balcony Brew Review, which is a thing I do, this is actually the first beer we tried. Believe it was back in January. Paul, correct me if I'm wrong. It was in January that we
Right,
tried this beer out.
when we did the one, there was the one where I was like really bundled up, perhaps over bundled up for the weather, but it was very cold, so I figured we had to do Bourbon County because I was so inspired by that book by Josh Noel, the Tribune's writer about all things spirits and alcohol, Bourbon County Stout and Selling Out. So I felt like our first episode of the podcast version would have to be a Bourbon County as well.
And it's a good one too. It's a good thing, and I've gotten through some of Josh's book. It's great because it explores, the craft beer and starting out and how you be innovative, and then you face the corporate pressure. So, like I said, not very far into it, but obviously lots of time right now. So I'm going to get that finished up. The Cafe de Olla, pretty hefty, right around 13, I believe, on the APV. So pretty decent one.
13.5.
13.5, so my guess was good. And it's pretty good. It's very cinnamony, very a little bit coffee, but more cinnamony than the other beers you'd be used to having for the Bourbon County. But I have not, there has not been a Bourbon County I haven't liked. So again, another good choice.
I mean, the Bourbon Counties are all different and they're all unique. They're all special in their own way. This one was made with Intelligentsia coffee, and I really can pick up the hints of coffee. Like, to me, it's pretty strong. Not so strong that it's not like some of these other beers that we've seen recently come out. That seems to be a big trend of combining, an upper and a downer, combining the caffeine of coffee with in beer. The cinnamon is definitely strong, but the notes of orange I don't really pick up as much. Do you?
No, I my tongue's not exactly great for that. I mean, we had the Midnight Orange at Murphy's, and we didn't even. I mean, it tasted more chocolatey, but it was very, very good. That was completely different.
Yeah, Murphy's. Really missed those times when we could go out there because I believe that was national title game night in early January where
Indeed, it was.
Don't they have like 5 different Bourbon Counties on tap there?
They did. They did not have the reserve. They just ran out of that, but I had a chance, I believe, because I live right near there, so I went there twice to try their Bourbon Counties. As you know, for Bourbon County, you really can only have 3 at a time, or else you're going to be in a lot. And these are drafts, not bottles. You have more than that, you're going to be in a bit of pain. So
yeah, even one you got to pace yourself with.
Yeah, so it's pretty good, but I don't get as much of the orange. I get a lot more like the cinnamony. I don't know if that's maybe the coffee or not. There's some that are super strong with coffee, but this one gets a little more of like a cinnamony. That I've had some of those that, even some like molasses beers. I know that Microphone Brewing has their Techno Gorilla beer that has molasses in it, and you really, really taste that. And this one, definitely I can get that, but everybody to their own tastes what they can. So, like I said, and that's the good thing about the beers. It's enjoyable. You get what you get out of each one of them, and you do your best with it.
Yeah, it gets to a point where, as this was detailed in the book, the beer becomes as much the event as the event because they are pricey, that's for sure. So you certainly aren't drinking 3 at a time. You're probably not even maybe buying that many at a time, and they're so strong, and there's so many ingredients. There's a lot of flavors. There's a lot going on. And to me, it's very interesting, this whole trend. It's carried over to food now of aging in bourbon barrels. At the beginning of January, I had the privilege of going down to Kentucky and covering a Wildcats game in Lexington. I hit a couple stops on the Bourbon Trail. I hit All-Tech Brewing, which is the Kentucky Coffee Ale and the Kentucky Bourbon Barrel, and hopefully we'll be able to do a future episode on one of those.
Yeah, and it'll be fantastic. And I've had the All-Techs I've had a couple of times. The All-Techs are good because if you like a good bourbon-aged beer, you're going to have it and you're not going to be completely knocked down. You get the flavor, but it's not quite as super strong in the APVs, and it kind of does the trick. So I actually really enjoy their beers. There's actually they actually have a barrel-aged red that I want to try that I just seen about. I actually might go, speaking of the whole supporting your local areas, there's a restaurant, PR Italian Bistro, that actually has that to go for sale. So I might actually go grab one of those here before well, we're not shut down completely, as Mayor Lloyd Lightfoot said. It's just if you're sick, stay in. And CPS will not go back to April 20th because Paul and I were talking. We thought that we might get the city shut down. This is Thursday, March 19th that we're doing this. So happy Michael Jordan comeback anniversary day, by the way. But those are the only two orders. It was not a city shutdown or a shelter in place, which would be probably the more formal term of it today.
Right, and people need to realize that a shelter in place is you can go out, you just are only supposed to go out for the essentials, and some places will be open, just only the most essential places.
Right.
It's not lockdown, it's not martial law.
Yeah, and that did not have, like, none of that happened today. So I actually thought that might happen today. So it did not happen. So if you can support your local businesses, they need it. So I carried out last night from Harold's Chicken, which was fantastic, by the way.
Oh, amazing.
So it was it was fantastically good. So it was remarkable. So Paul, let's start out with that thing you brew. And like I said, I'll start with you. Anything random this week you wanted to discuss first?
I don't think I ever told you about the time I met Al Gore, did I?
I don't think I have. I know you've talked about him. I didn't know you'd met him.
Well, I went to go see him speak, and I believe it was 2013, maybe it was 2012 at a NASCAR event. And when he spoke, he opened with this joke where he said, "When I first heard about NASCAR grain, I thought NASCAR and environmentalism go together like sharks and tornadoes."
Well, it's interesting. I like that. I mean, I assume the Sharknado, correct? I assume that's a reference to those magical series of movies that were released a few years ago.
This was at when the first one came out, which in my eyes will always be the best one because, like, anytime when you have the so bad it's good, the first one is the best one, and then it's a series of decreasing returns after that.
Yeah, like I said, Charles Tillman, Peanut Tillman was in one of them. I want to say he was in Sharknado 4. He was in as I want to say either a National Weather Service guy or some sort of control operations sort of job. He wasn't in there for long, but
when I interviewed him, he said it got cut. He was an air traffic controller, and his lines were so bad, and he was such a bad actor, he got cut.
He was in there. I thought he was in there, but it was. I mean it when I say it's brief. He might have been on camera twice, and his lines might have been one or two. Extremely brief. If you might have missed it if you looked away. If you weren't looking for Charles, you might have missed him. It wasn't long, but I thought he made it because I thought I actually remember taking a picture of it and posting it on the mighty Twitter.
So then after the event, they had a media availability, and they grabbed Brian France, the president of NASCAR. They grabbed Al Gore, and they grabbed General Wesley Clark. And with Brian France, he was just very kind of distant and not all that interested in doing it, which is typical for him. With Al Gore, they did not give us any interview time. With General Wesley Clark, we had a little bit, and I was very aggressive, where I got most of the questions in. Like, maybe we had 3, I got 2. And I asked him, like, something about Syria, and then he just rambled on, and it took up, like, all that time. It was right during the Syria crisis.
Oh, wow. No, it's interesting. I guess I'm trying to remember who I've met at NASCAR race. Well, I met John Cena at a NASCAR race. He was fantastic, by the way. Fantastic. Came up to him. He was just watching there, did an interview, was just absolutely fantastic. Like, most fantastic thing ever. He was just great.
I've heard he's wonderful.
Yeah, he was absolutely wonderful talking to people. It wasn't just the interview. He was talking to people, conversating with people. He was all over he was everything you would expect from a WWE superstar. There. They also had the Fantastic Four. So Jessica Alba was there, and they did kind of like a group interview where all four of them were underneath a tent. I remember my late friend John, who was there with me at the race. He actually asked Jessica Alba a question, and it pretty much made his life. It was incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was it.
She's a very, very beautiful, very talented, very rich woman.
Yeah, and that was, I'm trying to remember, because that was kind of when she was starting to ascend to superstardom. When that was kind of right in the curve where she was becoming like one of the faces of Hollywood. And that was right about that. So this would have been the 2007 Coke 600. I'll give you $1 if you can name the winner of the race. It was a fuel mileage race at the end.
Jimmy Johnson.
No.
Clint Boyer.
No. It's relatively random.
Martin Truex Jr.
No.
I'm at a loss. I'm stumped.
Casey Mears won that race.
Oh, wow.
Casey Mears won the race and ran out of gas in the backstretch. That's how close he was. I'm trying to remember because Casey won it. I'm trying to remember. It was weird because it was Kyle Petty, the veteran. Kyle Petty finished third. So to prove how super random it was, Kyle Petty finished third. I want to say Dale Jr. was somewhere in the top 5, but I don't know whether he was 2 or 4. And then J.J. Yaley was somewhere in there too. I want to say it was Mears, Earnhardt, Petty, Yaley, and then somebody was 5th. Because like Tony Stewart led, Denny Hamlin led, but everybody was just short on gas. So basically, it just worked out that Casey Mears held on just long enough to win.
Well, apparently, our third co-host, Otis, is really...
Otis!
I'm sure you're picking up that. I'm sure you can hear him.
I am. He's voicing his displeasure with the car of tomorrow, which was the, I wouldn't say ill-fated, but not very well received NASCAR attempt at trying to find a racing safety sort of balance. And that was during that era.
Yeah, Otis is telling you that his favorite racer is Junior, and the sport's not going to be the same without Dale Earnhardt.
No, it never will be. He was one of the last of the old guys, and I mean he was, he was a link to not only the past of NASCAR, his father, the Pettys, the Junior John, all of those guys in the past. He's not only a link to them, he was a link to what I would call kind of the new age, golden age of NASCAR, where you had the Earnhardts, you had the Wallaces, you had some of the Bill Elliots, where they were transitioning toward the end of their careers. And then you had the new guys. You had the Jeff Gordons. Little bit later toward that end, you had the Jimmy Johnsons, but you had the Dale Juniors. You had the Tony Stewart when he moved over from the open wheel racing to NASCAR and had immediate and immense success. He was in that golden era. And the sport kind of is in a point, I mean, not to diatribe on NASCAR, but the sport's at a point now where they need to discover their new identity because they're going to lose Jimmy this year. Jimmy, obviously, Jimmy, a fine, and I've always said even maybe some ways unappreciated American athlete with what he has done in the sport. He moves on. NASCAR is now in the point of developing their new starters. Right now, if you look at the leaders of the sport, it's Hamlin, it's Busch. They're in the process of having to develop new stars as they kind of reach out to a new generation of fan.
Well, I just got a press release from them 2 days ago, and I did a story about it, about esports and the iRacing that they're doing and the Invitational, and they've gotten everybody involved from Cup to Xfinity, from truck racing, all the main 3 levels. And that's now, 2020 was going to be a huge year for esports. Now it's going to be massive.
Yeah. And maybe that's
how all the leagues are going to have to do for the time being is rely on esports.
Yeah, and I know the Chicago Fire, they have their own that's right now it's going. I know that there is a actual football league that they do, a simulation football league. that they actually have going on right now, and they're in the middle of their season. So you're going to see esports, and maybe that's a way that NASCAR drivers reach out. That you reach to find the new fan. The sport will live. There's money in the TV deals, but they need to kind of get a refresher here. You're past now the early 2000s where NASCAR exploded. To think about it this way, in the opening years of the Brickyard. And now, granted, there's some novelty there because NASCAR went there in 1994 for the first time. They sold out every single seat in that venue. They couldn't have infield for a long time. You had to have a physical ticket for a seat in that venue. And there's 250,000 seats, and they sold every one of them. And there was some scalper demand for it to prove just how big that sport was late 90s, early 2000s. That was the Brickyard 400, that every seat was sold out.
I think this year we're going to see that race canceled, and probably Indy as well, because it's on the same weekend. If the Kentucky Derby is already moved to September, that's probably going to happen.
Yeah, the Indy 500. I'm surprised they're probably holding out. The Kentucky Derby fell in that 80-day window. That not 80-day, 8-day window.
8 weeks.
The 8 weeks. Yeah, the 8-week window. Sorry about that. The Bourbon County's not hitting me that hard, for the love of God. I believe the 8-week window expires around May 10th. So that takes out the Derby. I don't know if things are going to be so normal that the 500 will be able to get that going, if they're going to be able to have the 500 in time. It's later in the month. I would guess that race would be moved to the fall. I think it'd be a lot of fun, Paul, if they ran it on physical Labor Day. So, in the Indy 500 back in the day, they used to run it Memorial Day. I think it'd be really cool if they ran the race on Labor Day. You could have a super weekend, because I believe the Kentucky Derby is Labor Day Saturday. Right. And you could have, could have your Labor Day football. Monday. Yeah. And you could have your Labor Day Monday be the Indy 500. And then you don't have to worry about any NFL or anything like that. I believe the NFL would start the previous week. I have to get my dates correct as to when the season falls. But either way, you're avoiding it. I think a Labor Day Monday Indianapolis 500 would be just fantastic. You're going to guarantee yourself, at least beyond precipitation considerations, of course, probably not going to get one of those 90 or 100-degree weekends, that sometimes have really plagued back in the Brickyard 400 days. They would just get some atrocious heat days late there. So you take yourself kind of out of the August heat, not by a ton, but you give yourself a pretty good chance to have some decent weather.
Well, I'm sure Al Gore would not care for any unseasonable heat. He'd say,
"Yeah,
that's not good for the polar bear."
I do. I love the accent, Paul. By the way, it's fantastic.
Thank you. I've been working on it. We did this during our test show, and the producers really liked it a lot when we did our test screening for the show. But I wanted to hear, why don't you clue our listeners in on your discussion about Mad Men?
So I've picked up Mad Men. Oddly enough, before this whole crisis began, I was looking for a show, and I picked up AMC's Mad Men. A lot of people I knew were fans of it during the show, loyal followers, loyal watchers. Watch from start to finish. So I was really interested, and I'm like, and people had suggested it because of its incredible production value. So I watched it and binged it, I think, in about 3.5 weeks. I think I may have started about mid-February, maybe, right about 3.5, 4 weeks, right about a month. Went ahead and binged it, and it was fantastic. And there's so many reasons why. Number one, the character development is fantastic. All the characters have their sort of personalities, the way they do things, and they develop as time goes along, yet still always maintain some sort of bedrock personality. Everyone from Don to Roger to Joan to Peggy, they really do develop. It's really fantastic to see. For those of you who follow me on social media, I did finish the series last night. So this would have been March 18th. I finished it up. And I really thought the series brought it all together perfectly. I think from start to finish, you had the start of a narrative and the end of a narrative, and it was perfect over 7 seasons. And hefty seasons, too. All seasons went, I think, at least 13 episodes. Really impressed with what the it did, and just how it looked, and it was very authentic to what at least I know of the 60s. It had a feel of it. But to get more to it, probably number one, I was on Team Peggy all the way. Peggy Olson, who started as a secretary and worked her way all the way up to the office and then the top of management. I am on Team Peggy all the way. Overcoming adversity, working to build your craft, creative. I'm on Team Peggy till I die. The hashtag, book it. That's what it is. That's my first observation. Number two, Don Draper is one lost character. Extremely creative, extremely haunted, very compelling.
A guy that you have to have strong opinions about because he's such a anachronism. There's, I just made a joke today about like a really dumb movie that I started watching during quarantine is the Cannonball Run. And,
oh gosh.
Yeah, exactly. And
I have not seen it.
Well, it is literally all-star cast. It's Burt Reynolds, Farrah Fawcett, Roger Moore, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Terry Bradshaw, like goes on and on. But the first few, the first half, every time they like introduce a character, a competitor in the race, they take the most stereotypical background music you can find, and it plays upon the absolute worst. Cartoonish is the best word to put it. Stereotypes, racism, sexism, whatever. And the thing is, I really don't care for people who like go out there and write diatribes about taking like 2020 standards and then applying it to 1972 or whatever, because you can't do that and it's ridiculous. But it is always funny to kind of see these movies and you're like, oh my God, they could never make this today. Or if they did, they'd have to cut all this. It's crazy. And this is like a classic example.
Oh, it's perfect, Paul, because that was actually going to be point 3 that I was going to make. And that's actually perfect how it fits in there. Is number 3 just, my God, what would happen if those people in the office did that today? I think in the first episode, like 3 people would be immediately fired.
Oh my God, yeah.
It wouldn't even be close. First of all, these men and women drink like fish. I mean, it really is incredible. I mean, the way they drink, I mean, creatively, I'd be done at noon every day. I mean, I know that people did the 3 martini lunches. I know that was that's just what people did there. I don't know whether human beings back then just could take more alcohol or everybody just drank more earlier and then built up these like,
they have like a full
tolerances.
porterhouse steak for lunch, because imagine the protein you need to consume that counteract.
I mean, what do you do? Are you doing like 2.5 hour powerlifting here? I mean, a porterhouse for lunch. I mean, beyond the drinking, a porterhouse for lunch. I mean, I guess if I was hungry and didn't have anything to do and could sleep for the next 3 hours, that's great. But I don't. Their tolerances and just the way that people treated in the workplace, my God. I mean, they'd be fired right now. I mean, I couldn't even imagine. That show, it's crazy. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. But I really enjoyed Mad Men. I know most of the people who I've seen it have the same opinions. But like you had said, be very curious now if it was even made even in the Me Too movie. So that the series, I believe, ended in 15 or 14. So
yeah, I don't think it could be made in the Me Too era.
Yeah, but it was. But then again, though, maybe you could even make it at the same point because you're looking at it and saying in context, this is what happened in the 60s. I mean, it just could never happen now. I mean, it really is amazing. I've often talked about the evolution of society every 50 years, and you certainly see it when you're watching Mad Men. Other than that, fantastic show. Enjoyed every episode. I really did.
Mel Brooks, comedic genius. Love the PSA he did with his son this past week about what's going on. Mel Brooks movies, probably can't make most of them.
Mel Brooks is an amazing, yeah, I mean, you really couldn't. You look at some of those, especially like Blazing Saddles would be hard to make now. You look at a lot of it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them. But Mel's a genius, isn't he?
Oh, he's an American treasure.
Yeah, he really is. And, he still looks spry. I mean, he's well into his 93, I believe.
He is 93. Yep.
93 years old. And he still looks spry. I saw him do an interview maybe a few months ago. Still have a lot of wit, still very witty. I love Spaceballs. I still think, I know that, some might disagree. Spaceballs was just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's like, it's great to see these different cultural products that transcend generations. Last month, when we were still allowed to go places and do stuff, I visited my nephews at the University of Illinois, and we watched the NASCAR episode of South Park before we went out.
Oh man, boy, that's a
classic.
That's a Cartman Butters classic duo right there.
And they, in past years at family gatherings, I would come up and visit. We'd watch Spaceballs. We'd watch Family Guy, their take on Star Wars, the 3-parter. And then I remember a few years ago, the first time I had a discussion with their parents, my sister and brother-in-law, about Animal House. And we're like, yeah, one guy's maybe old enough for it yet, but not the other one. And then we're like, oh, there's a couple scenes in there that, again, would never see the light of day in today's standards.
Yeah, and like I said, movies, entertainment, all these things evolve through the years. So, it's interesting to see. And these are interesting. That's kind of interesting discussion to have, especially watching the Mad Men, seeing what, just that show and see how much society really has changed. It really is incredible. So, it's been pretty good. So, Paul, outside of the kind of entertainment realm, anything else that you were interested in talking about? Obviously, there is so much here right now, that's going on. But I guess as we kind of transition, we're right now about 25 minutes in. What is it that, stands out the most to you about this time?
What it's going to be like when we're able to look back at it, because like here we are recording our first episode of this new podcast under extraordinary circumstances. This is not the podcast we envisioned when we had meetings on it on my birthday in February. Mm-hmm. This is not the vision, but we'll get there. We'll get through it. And what we're trying to do, like this morning when I watched CNBC, just the usual market stuff, and every anchor and every analyst or every whatever pundit showbiz TV character is at home and doing a video Skype or something from their house. And it's amazing how much everything escalated so quickly, how much March Madness was taken away and the Big Ten tournament. And before you know it, all winter sports are wiped out. And then you're looking at MLS today delayed their start another, I believe April 30th, I think is where they're at now, or that's where the English Premier League is as well.
Yeah.
Baseball is at May 10th. Isn't Major League Baseball at May 10th?
They are. I think they're hoping for I think right now the best is mid-May. I don't know. I mean, right now, again, the CDC, the 8-week thing is May 10th. I think that's kind of the next delay. I believe MLS said the same. I think that's kind of where everybody is. The only clue that the NHL gave is they said they were hoping at day 45 of this window, that basically the 8-week window, which Paul, I believe the 8-week window, if my math is wrong, correct me, I believe that's 56 days. They were hoping so they had marked it as 60 days for the CDC thing, which is about 2 months. They had hoped 45 days in that they would start some sort of training camp. They're the only one to really say that. Everybody else seems to be kind of holding on to mid-May as like where they're just kind of hovering right now. But I don't know, man. I think June or July. I think if June 1st you could have the arena sports begin, I think that would be probably the best case scenario.
Right. And if you could get the outdoor sports, that's obviously it's not social distancing and it's packed, but at least there's open air and it's healthier and it's more conducive. But I honestly look at all these deadlines as just placeholders and they'll reevaluate.
Correct.
And I don't think we're going to have any semblance of normal life until June or July.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm hoping. My hope would be 4th of July, because I know I'm training for the marathon. My hope was that full training could kind of resume the dream around July 1st or like June 1st. Like I said, right now you are allowed to run outside, and I do a little bit. You are allowed to run outside for the moment. But again, if they were to have a shelter in place, you got to stay there. And Paul, you had mentioned, about a week ago, and we were actually doing kind of our test trial podcast. This would have been about 3:30 on Wednesday. Things were just starting to get real. And then about 4 hours later, they really got real. So we would have been done around 5 o'clock or so. We had a little bit of delay in the start, and then we went about 4 o'clock. So 5 o'clock, they banned spectators from the Big Ten tournament. At 7 o'clock, I believe Tom Hanks came out and said he had coronavirus.
Right.
About 7:45 was the Oklahoma City Jazz they called off the game basically with both teams on the floor. I'll have to check that. Both teams are obviously outside of Rudy Gobert. So that's when Gobert got the coronavirus test. About a half hour after that, the NBA suspended their season. So the Blackhawks are playing at the United Center. They finished their game. So the next day, this would be by 5 o'clock the next day. So that's 24 hours after we left the studio. The NHL, the MLB, the NCAA, the Big Ten tournament was suspended that morning, either late that night or that morning. And the NCAA tournament were all off 24 hours later.
Right. So it was like we got that recording session in, and then when we were done, we were on our way, then everything escalated at I forgot who tweeted this, but it's such a great joke. They said something about within 2 to 3 days of the news, it was an entire verse of Billy Joel, "We Didn't Start the Fire" in terms of relevant national events.
It is incredible.
Because both like that song and then REM, "It's the End of the World as We Know It," they move on that insanely fast pace with the verses, and you try to keep up with everything that's being said, and that is what it was like. It was by that, because today is Thursday, right?
I think so.
So then it would have been last week Thursday, like total shutdown. Because I remember when I had said that when they start playing behind closed doors and there's no fans, that's when I pull my own credentials. That's when I withdraw. Because granted, in theory, it's safer for you as a media member because there aren't fans. But my thinking has always been, if it's not safe for fans, then it's not safe for me. And now it's just full on. I mean, it's so surreal, all of it.
Yeah, it's a lot so fast, and you kind of get a new normal to the point where. But I think that we as people have got to find a way to heed these warnings and try to do what we can to stay positive. I think somebody had the tweet that our ancestors at these times of crisis were called to war. We're called to go home. So
right. We're called to sit on the couch. They were called to go to Europe or Japan.
Yeah, and some of those, it's like I said, when can you imagine hearing that? Some of those especially like looking back at some of the World War II stuff, stuff people dealt with. It's unbelievable. There's a reason why they're called the greatest generation.
Right. It's natural to analogize this to the Spanish flu and World War I. But I feel more of the World War II analogy in that it's this call to mobilize. It's that I just saw something, Domino's is hiring 1,000 people because it's going to be, we're going to eat delivery more. And I'm sure Clorox and I'm sure Purell and I'm sure the soap companies and everybody, I'm sure this is huge for them. And it's the reason I don't think even 9/11 wasn't like this for us. And that's the only kind of transcendent generational news event that we can all relate to. I would say World War II is a good analogy because it was every aspect of life had to shift and then go into something else. Like GM stopped making cars, they started making tanks.
Yeah. It's like I said, man, it's unprecedented, and you don't see it coming. It's a lot for people to take. I think the response from the people has been good so far. And I think that's all you can really do is just stay positive and
and try not to degenerate into Howard Hughes, or at least as how Howard Hughes was portrayed in The Aviator when you're under quarantine.
Yeah, I mean, it's you try to do what you can do. You do some indoor workouts. Like you can still run and go for walks now. You just got to kind of stay away from crowds or people. You got to kind of keep your distance. That's for now. I don't know. Like I said, if there was like I said, I don't know yet, but we'll see.
Well, my dad liked it, but I told him about prison workouts. He thought that was really funny. I told him what you said.
That's what it is. It's very confined workouts. It's very confined workouts. You're just doing stuff in there, and lots of push-ups, sit-ups, lots of stuff that you can do basically in the space of just a little area.
Well, for our one last sip segment, which is going to be on the format of the show, we are going to have guests once things get kind of up and running and we kind of get in the swing of it and things are more normal. But we're going to do our segments, That Thing You Brew, Island of Misfit Toys, and One Last Sip. So I know the topic I want to cover for mine, but if you got yours, you can go first.
I think for mine is, for my One Last Sip is, one thing I want people to remember is that in times of crisis, the great can come to the forefront. I had referenced a few times on social media a great line that I love from the movie Apollo 13. Made by Ed Harris, the actor playing Gene Kranz, who was basically the man at the top in Mission Control. I'm blanking on his official title right now. I can look it up if I possibly can. He had said in the movie, there was basically a scene where I believe it was one of the controller guys and the PR guy for NASA talking about a lot of the things that could go wrong, the heat shield. There was, I guess, a typhoon around where they were supposed to land. And the controller said, this could be the greatest disaster in NASA's history. And Krantz at Harris turns around and goes, this instead will be our finest hour. And I think that's what people need to try to remember, is that we can make this our generation's finest hour. This is unprecedented for anybody who's been here. We've been lucky enough that we have not had a world war in our generation. We have had the war on terror, which is a very different war because there's covert stuff. There are things that are done, whereas a lot different than, general infantry conflicts, which we had in World War I, World War II, Korea, and then, of course, the Vietnam War. And I think that there are little things that people can do every day that just help to keep people enthusiastic, help to better society, even if it's just a little thing. Sometimes as easy as doing something to make people laugh or make people be entertained. This can be our generation and other generations' finest hour. And I think we should take it seriously, even if there really isn't much you can do. You can stay calm, you can stay in, and you can do your best to contribute to society in a positive way. Make this our finest hour. So when, history does make movies, or when there is a new Mad Men making a story about our timeline, and this becomes a big episode of that, it will be remembered as one of transformation, one in which society improved despite all that went wrong.
Well said. Very well said. I couldn't agree more. I mean, even enough as just staying home and staying away in case you're a vector, in case you're a carrier, then you can stay away and you don't spread it. Maybe you have it, but you don't have symptoms and you're fine with it, but you could give it to somebody who won't be fine with it, and that's important right now.
Yeah,
that's of the utmost importance right now.
You, sir?
I actually am going to talk about something more lighter, I guess, but I'm going to talk about another pop culture thing.
Go ahead, man.
Now that we're all under quarantine and now that we're all going to be spending time with books, movies, websites, etc., you can all watch The Irishman. And granted, the movie's very long, so maybe you could watch The Irishman 2, maybe 2.5 times even. But no, seriously. I mean, it is over 3 hours long, but I think I would like to read the book that it's based on, called I Heard You Paint Houses, which supposedly was the first thing Jimmy Hoffa said on the phone to Frank Sheeran, who's the main character of the movie, the first time he ever spoke to him. And I Heard You Paint Houses is a reference to whacking somebody with the paint referring to the blood. But the part of the Irishman that I wanted to talk about, and I did enjoy it, and it was kind of like Goodfellas, but with more historical characters in it. But the thing I wanted to talk about was there is a scene for the fans of the Godfather trilogy, and obviously if you're just fans of mafia movies in general, what De Coppola did with I knew it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart. The iconic scene of a big party, a formal affair, a black tie event in which essentially the killer is making it known to the person who's going to be killed that this is your like it's inevitable now. Like we've reached the point of no return. And it comes within the midst of a joyous affair, of a celebration. In The Irishman, during the scene when Frank Sheeran is having this honoring, he's being told to tell Jimmy to try to convince him, like, you gotta back off, you gotta cool down, like you're in over your head. It's like that point of no return scene where he's like, because Jimmy Hoffa is so stubborn, he's not gonna back down, he's not gonna turn around. And I really think that Scorsese was directly referencing Coppola there, and it shows, and it's brilliant, and it's great.
No, I can't wait to watch it, man. I've been way overdue to do it. Everybody says it's long, but everybody seems to think it's pretty good. So can't wait.
Hello?
Oh, I'm still here, man. No,
it
all
looks
good.
like that network dropped for a bit, but
Well,
no, you'll love
right.
it, and
we're good to go.
I also have that Churchill book, so when it's safe to see one another again, I'll give you that.
I can't wait, man. It'll be
book
wonderful.
That they based the movie off of, and the book is even better. And I guess the last thing we should do before we go is just plug our social media accounts and the links where our listeners can consume our work.
Awesome, man. So let's just start with ourselves. I'm at Hawley Sports, HAWLEY, and I am also on Instagram at LHawley80. Paul?
At Paul M. Banks on Instagram and Twitter.
Okay. And for our podcast, right now our Twitter is at Brew Balcony. That's all one word, Brew Balcony. So that's our Twitter account. And Paul, you have our Instagram account. Again, both of these are pretty young.
It is not signed up as of yet, but I'll get to it tomorrow.
That's no problem. We've got a lot of time here before we get to it. But we are on Twitter right now. Again, that's Brew Balcony. And it's all one word. And if you're looking for the picture, it's a green beer with a shamrock. Appropriate for the time. Not quite the St. Patrick's Day we all hope for. But right now, we're just happy to be inside having a beer. So for Paul, I'm Larry. We hope you enjoyed this first episode. We got a lot more to come, and we'll get even better with each one. So thanks for tuning in, and cheers.